Beautiful. All right, hello everyone. So I'm Dominik, and by now you all know that. So I'm one of the co-founders of IOTA, and I'm here to give you a rough introduction about myself, like 5 minutes about my background, and then later on I'll talk a bit about how IOTA came to be and kind of our grand vision of where we want to be with IOTA in 10 to 15 years. And so I already now want to apologize for all the profanity and the swearing that's going to happen. Because kind of when I give these talks, I always freestyle them and I just go with the flow, and I usually swear a lot. And so I guess on YouTube we can just like beep out those fucks and those whatever. And yeah, so let's jump into it. So a bit about my background. So I'm the way that I started my career is being a no-life gamer. So I was one of those people back then who was, when I was a little kid, I was too bored with the beautiful nature of Südtirol. And so I was like, hey, I need to do something that's exciting. And so what I did back then is I actually started out with hacking computer games. So if all of you know Call of Duty, which is one of the most popular computer games, it has like 20 to 40 million players. If you've ever wondered what the guy at the top of the leaderboard looks like, you have one here. Because I was actually the first in the leaderboard in Call of Duty back then when I was 14. And so it's kind of weird, like it's one of those humble brags, I think. And so this experience with hacking games and going, like pushing the limits really like intrigued me. Because what I did back then is I didn't just hack the game, I also started selling the hacks. Because when I was trolling those online forums, I started getting contacted from other no-life gamers who like reached out to me like, hey man, can you give this to me as well? I was like, sure, why not? Give me 50 euros. and so I created my PayPal account when I was 14. Don't ask me how I created it, because also you have to be 18 to create it. And so I created a PayPal account and I started earning money with that. But after a certain point, I started realizing, hey, this is kind of boring. Because it's just the same thing over and over again, and so we just said, hey, like I'm going to do something else. But what really intrigued me with this first experience of like hacking games and selling those to other people is this entrepreneurship. Like truly building a product that solves a problem and that is needed and that people are willing to pay money for. And so with that experience, I actually started going on this quest, kind of this hustling, like figuring out what kind of product I should create to make money. Because at that time, I really wanted to be independent. I wanted to make money so that I don't rely on anyone. And so what I started doing then is I actually started out with drop shipping on eBay. And so I used my sister's eBay account to sell software. It was actually going quite well. So I had my own e-commerce store. I made some money when I was 15. It was like 20,000 euros back then. But eventually I got shut down. So my eBay account, or my sister's eBay account got banned. She wasn't too happy about that, honestly. But what I realized with that is that I needed to have a very reliable income stream. I shouldn't just be hustling, but I should focus on a single product. And that is why you start realizing, hey, I need to do my own startup. Because if I do my own startup, I can really build something that has a single feature, that focuses on offering a single product that people really want. Now before I actually got into doing my own startup, this whole Bitcoin and blockchain stuff happened to me. So it was 2011, and so I was on trolling on those online forums. And some friend just sent me the white paper of Bitcoin. I was like, hey, this is really interesting, even though I understood like 5% of it, because my English wasn't that good back then, it was 15. I was like, hey, this is really intriguing, because what really intrigued me with Bitcoin is this concept of having a completely new financial system. So no longer being reliant on PayPal, no longer being reliant on banks, but instead having this permissionless innovation where anyone is able to participate in these economic transactions and start creating value, like participating and contributing. Because obviously, like my PayPal account got shut down, my eBay account got shut down, and I wasn't able to do anything. But now with this new technology, I was able to actually do stuff. Because like the main thing that really drove me into Bitcoin is because it enabled me to be an entrepreneur. Because now I can really start paying my people and I can start accepting money. And so with that experience, I said, hey, like I have to do a startup in this whole Bitcoin space. Now the good thing is back then I had 10,000 euros of an AWS credit, so Amazon Web Services, which is like a cloud service provider. And I think some of you know that in order to create a new currency in this blockchain, you have to put up some hashing power. And so with those 10,000 euros of AWS credits, I was able to mine Bitcoins. I was able to mine all alternative currencies as well. And so I still remember the day when I was in school and I was like, fuck, the price is increasing so much. I have to go. I was rushing down to the school library and it was like setting up new miners just to make more money. And so it turned out quite well. And so when I was 16, I had around 100K. So it was kind of a good start. And so I started realizing, hey, it's not just about this mining stuff, but it's really that this whole blockchain space is a new ecosystem where you can start building your own startup, where you can start really creating and contributing value back to the community. And so what I did back then is I was looking at the entire landscape and was figuring out, like, where is there really a problem right now? And being the kind of naive kid I was like thinking, hey, I'm going to make a Bitcoin exchange because like they make so much money. I was like, I can do that too, right? And so I came to an online forum where I then, through coincidence, was meeting up with my co-founder now, which is David Sunstable. So I was on this online forum, was like saying, hey, like I have this idea and I'm looking for investors. So I have my own capital, but I need more money to actually do something with it. So David came to me and said, hey, like, let's do this together, because he has contacts to those whales, which are like people who have a lot of cryptocurrencies. And so we came together, we started raising funds. At one point it was nearly $500,000. So I started realizing, hey, like now it's about to get serious, because now we're actually to build something and execute on it. And so I was looking at all of the problems that I'm currently facing. And the biggest problem was always like the regulatory stuff, the legal stuff, and the banking stuff, all of the hardcore stuff. And so what I did back then is, through my contacts in this whole cryptocurrency space, I started knowing more about this crypto valley in Zug. So the crypto valley in Zug is in Switzerland. It's basically where we were trying to set up a self-regulating organization. We came to the regulators and said, hey, like, we want to be able to regulate ourselves because we know how the technology works, how it will be adopted, and the current challenges. So I went to Switzerland, but what ended up happening in Switzerland is kind of the reverse thing what you usually do. Because usually if you go to Switzerland, you end up saving tax money. I ended up going to Switzerland to lose all my money. And so that kind of sucked. But I realized, hey, like, this is not the end. Like, this is just the beginning. Like, it was my first failed startup. It was a lot of hardship. But the reason why, just as a point of why my startup failed is because it was kind of stupid. Was trusting the wrong people. And it was also like this whole cryptocurrency space, it just like suddenly crashed. Because when I went into this space, I was thinking, hey, like, I have now all of this money and now I can start spending it over this time frame. But suddenly the crash happened and I had nothing. And so I had to figure out what I'm actually going to do. And so me and David kind of went on this quest to figure out what are we going to do next. Luckily, he and one of our current co-founders back then already had started another startup focused on creating new hardware, specifically for the Internet of Things. And we, back then, through this hardware, we actually started to realize, hey, if we truly want to build and enable this Internet of Things, we need to have a way for machines to actually pay each other. Because that is really the missing piece for the Internet of Things to take off. And now before I jump into how IOTA was actually created, I want to quickly mention what our vision with IOTA actually is. So our vision of the Internet of Things is this concept of fog computing, where you start processing the data locally instead of sending the data first to the cloud processes the data and then sends it back to those tiny IoT devices. Obviously that stuff doesn't scale and it doesn't work. Instead, you need to be able to make the decisions locally. You need to process the data locally, and you also need to be able to share resources locally, because you really want to make it possible for one machine that has access capacity, access resources, like for example, computational power, storage, or electricity, to be able to sell that to another machine which really needs this resource right now. And obviously when it comes to the Internet of Things, those are deterministic machines. Those machines are not going to have a telco subscription service, right? But instead they're going to pay on demand for the resource that they're going to utilize. And so what we started to realize, hey, this whole Internet of Things space, it really needs a micro payment protocol where you can pay per resource, where you're no longer reliant on transaction fees, and where you're no longer reliant on a trusted third party that can eventually shut you down. But instead, this whole Internet of Things and this whole fog computing environment needs a kind of permissionless innovation layer where anyone can start participating and start contributing to a whole new economy. And then we went on this quest to look at how we can actually achieve this vision of a machine economy where machines start trading with each other without any human involvement anymore. And obviously, because we've been in this blockchain space for so long, and we actually pioneered this space also by introducing some new fancy technologies, like for example, the full proof of stake. We started realizing early on, like, hey, this whole blockchain space, it's so overhyped. Everyone is talking so much bullshit, throwing out all of these absurd claims, kind of like we can do this and that, even though it's not the reality. Start to realize, hey, this technology, when it comes to the Internet of Things, it's fundamentally flawed. And instead, we have to create a completely new architecture to actually enable this vision of a machine economy. And so the good thing is that the 4 founders of IOTA, so it's me, David Sundsebø from Norway, and Sergey Popov from Brazil, and Sergey Vancheglo, aka Come From Beyond from Belarus, we had to do this versatile skill set. Because me and David, we were really into the tech stuff, but we also focused on executing the vision and most important, the business side. And Sergey Popov was one of those really hardcore mathematicians, and Sergey Vancheglo is one of those computer science geniuses. And so it was a perfect mix coming together. And so what we then did is we came up with a white paper. And obviously to execute this idea, because, you know, like I lost all my money in Switzerland, we had to figure out a new way to actually build this protocol. And so what we did then is we did an ICO. So an ICO, I guess most of you probably know what an ICO is. An initial coin offering where you start raising money and you give, in return, you give those tokens. And now, right now, all of those ICOs are really absurd, like random teams raising $200 million. And so we were the team that raised $500,000. And so that's nothing, right? But it was still something, and was sufficient for us to actually get started and build this protocol. And so with this 500K, we then went on this quest to actually build it and execute on it. And I can tell you it was kind of very difficult to be this underdog in this space, because every time you were trying to push out something new and you were saying, hey, like we actually solve blockchain's problems, nobody was listening to you, right? You can kind of compare this to screaming underwater. Because you have a protocol that actually solves problems that can truly change something, but nobody cares because everyone is too busy making money with Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. And so over the years, we just simply realized, hey, like we need to focus on just the execution and not worry about anything else. And it's easier said than done, because obviously all of those other people, the main thing that kind of unsettled us is when we realized, hey, like all of those other people, they start making millions of dollars, and we're kind of stuck in this loophole of trying to execute and trying to drive awareness. But we stayed cool. We didn't care that much. And we just continued executing on this vision of actually achieving and actually launching IOTA to the public. And so over the years, we started developing IOTA as a true protocol that is being utilized. So we are not the team that actually hypes. So we are really pragmatic. We focus on executing, on actually getting shit done, right? And so what we did then is, over the years, we started accumulating more and more business contacts through basically hustling, like just cold mailing corporates and so on and so forth. And we started realizing, hey, like this technology is really demanded. Everyone kind of starts realizing it's a slow progress, but people start getting aware of the technology, and they start realizing, hey, this is actually something that should be taken serious. And so even though it took quite a lot of time for people to get to this point where they started realizing, hey, this is something serious, it was still worth it for us to get this early feedback, because then we started realizing, hey, we are on the right path to actually build something that has true potential to change the future. And so over the years, we started, first of all, we wanted to build a startup out of IOTA. But this whole vision of a machine economy, we started to realize, hey, if you truly want to achieve a new economy, you need to build a standard. You need to build something open source that anyone can utilize without someone benefiting from the ground layer. Because if we, for example, had patented IOTA and charged royalty fees, I would argue that we would not be able to build this machine economy, because then companies have to pay us and nobody gets the benefit out of it except for us. And so what we did then instead, we obviously open sourced everything, and what we are right now in the process of is actually building a non-profit foundation in Germany. And so this non-profit foundation in Germany is really focused on enabling this interoperability. So getting more corporates on board and making sure that those corporates actually utilize the protocol and that we actually standardize this protocol. And right now we are really focused on getting more and more corporates involved. And we're already doing some really cool stuff, for example, with Bosch and with Volkswagen, with energy, mainly focused on the mobility sector, but also on the energy sector, mission critical infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And so our vision of IOTA is truly to enable this machine economy where machines start transacting with each other, but the potential of IOTA goes far beyond just this machine economy. Because having a transactional settlement protocol where you can transfer value without any transaction fees, without any trusted third party, without any bank is truly groundbreaking. It can truly change something. And so IOTA can also be utilized, for example, for remittances or web payments if you want to, for example, tip your favorite artist, and so on and so forth. And right now we're really in the process of getting more adoption, getting more awareness. And I guess this is one of those kind of steps forward to actually build something groundbreaking. And yeah, so I guess that's the majority of my talk right now. I kind of want to get this fluid interaction going where people can just ask me questions. Because the main thing that I also want to discuss is this whole blockchain space. Because what I can tell you about being at the forefront of this blockchain space is that it can be difficult. Because everyone talks so much bullshit, everyone hypes, but nobody makes money. And the thing is, only the consultants make money right now. But if you truly want to build a business on top of a blockchain right now, nobody knows how to make money with it. And so we're still in the early stages of blockchain and obviously also of Tangle and so on and so forth. But we're slowly progressing away from this amateur hour towards more professional involvement of corporates and also of non-profit foundations and so on and so forth.
Can you talk maybe a little bit about the differentiation between
exactly
what you guys are doing and other protocols that
yeah.
are around? That would be very interesting.
Yeah, so I didn't want to make this. So, quick question, how many of you do not know what the blockchain is? Okay, so that's very good. So the main thing, obviously, the main reason why we created IOTA is because we realized that blockchains have this inherent bottleneck. So the biggest problem of blockchains is that they're not scalable, so you can only push a certain number of transactions through, and they have huge transaction fees. So as you might know, a few months ago in Bitcoin, you had to pay $1 to $8 to push your transaction through, to get it accepted. And that's just insane if you want to make it possible for one machine to pay another machine just for a kilowatt hour of charging, and so on and so forth. And so these inherent limitations are these limiting factors in the adoption. And so what IOTA is, it has two main different aspects to it. It's no longer based on a blockchain, because like I said, blockchain is a sequential chain where you limit the scalability of it. And IOTA, instead of using a blockchain, we use a Tangle. So the Tangle is this directed acyclic graph. So it's one transaction that it references two past transactions. So it's no longer based on blocks and it has no chain. And the way that the Tangle then works is that it's kind of this mesh that evolves. So one transaction attests that two past transactions are valid, and through that you start building up confirmations. So that is the first major difference. So it's no longer based on a blockchain, but it's based on a Tangle. And the second major difference of IOTA is our consensus approach. So consensus is the most important aspect of a blockchain protocol. Like, how do we achieve consensus that the transaction is valid or invalid? So in a blockchain, that's the miners. So the miners are there to say, hey, like, we create the blocks, we aggregate all the transactions in a block, we validate the block between each other, and then propagate it throughout the entire network. And the miner is obviously there to get a transaction fee, and they can also be the gatekeepers of the blockchain. Like if you know about what's happening in Bitcoin, all of the drama is really because the miners fight against the core developers. And obviously also the biggest problem of mining is that they waste so much electricity. So Bitcoin today utilizes a few $100 million just to secure this blockchain, this distributed ledger. And so we came along and said, like, hey, instead of wasting all of this electricity, like obviously we care about the environment, right? We don't want to waste that electricity, but instead we want to have a different approach to consensus. So the way that IOTA approaches consensus is that it's no longer decoupled from the transaction-making process, but instead it's an inherent property of the protocol. So if you make a transaction in IOTA, you actually validate transactions. And because you're validating transaction, you're also contributing towards the security of the network. And because you're contributing towards the security of the network, you don't have to pay any transaction fees. So it's a very decentralized network where every participant has the same rights, the same rules, and everyone starts benefiting from participating in that sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What kind of use cases do you already have? You mentioned that you're already working with some corporates.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So the question was what kind of use cases we work on right now. So the main use case that we're working on right now are in mobility, making it possible for a car to have a wallet. And with that wallet, the car is able to pay for all of those value-added services. Like for example, for the parking station, or the EV charging station, or the toll station. So through that, the car kind of becomes this independent actor. Because now if a car has a wallet, with that wallet, it can not only pay for services, but it can also charge for services. So the car can now, for example, it can be leased out on demand. So now you have kind of a fleet sharing, a sharing fleet set up where cars start earning money and they start paying for those services. And through that, you get those independent actors out of it. So that's just in the mobility space. And secondly, we also do a lot in energy. Basically making it possible for you to contribute and by selling your electricity. So there's this concept of neighborhood electricity. So let's say that you have a photovoltaic setup, and you want to be able to sell the electricity that you generate, because you have excess electricity, right? You only utilize a certain amount. So instead, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to sell this electricity either to the grid operator or to your neighbors. And so through that, you really start creating this machine economy between households already. And secondly, our major focus is also really on security. So the beauty of IOTA is that it's the first protocol that you can utilize without any token. Like with any other blockchain protocol, you have to have a token in order to participate. But in IOTA, you don't need a token in order to participate. But instead, you can already use IOTA to secure data, for example. And with this concept of data integrity, like making data tamper-proof, because the entire network is obviously validating the data, they secure it, and it can no longer be changed, we can really start doing some really cool stuff. For example, what we're really focused on is the security of things. Because the Internet of Things is either going to be the biggest threat of humanity, or it's going to be the biggest potential. Obviously, we want to make it the biggest potential. And some of you probably have heard of some of the attacks that happened recently with IT webcams being hacked and utilized to DDoS websites. Obviously, we want to prevent something like that from happening. And so what we are building now on top of IOTA is actually kind of a security of things protocol, where we utilize IOTA to secure the data of machines, to have this system integrity. And we're actually utilizing this protocol and this concept also for autonomous vehicles, because autonomous vehicles also have the same problem. Like if one of the ECUs, for example, gets hacked, you can start doing really crazy stuff with it, which is even life-threatening. So what you want to do is you want to utilize something like IOTA for the system and machine integrity of the entire car. Because now you can start validating that the car actually does what it's supposed to do, and not that an external threat, like a hacker, is able to intrude it and change some of the variables that you suddenly steer to the right and you make an accident and something like that. That's right now our main focus, but for example, we also work with some really cool companies, like for example, Refunite. So Refunite, they provide digital identities to refugees. And what we help with them is actually for digital identity, but also to provide internet access to those refugees. And most importantly, also make it possible for those refugees to pay their loved ones via remittances. Yeah.
So where are you on the development timeline? Are people using Tangle?
Right, so we've been working on IOTA since 2015. So right now we have a reference implementation that's already working and being utilized. We obviously don't call it production ready in that sense, but it's being used. And IOTA so far has enabled more than $1 billion of value to be transferred. So it's definitely being used, and right now our main focus is kind of to build an alliance out of IOTA, because we obviously want to get those corporates on the same table to start working on this open specification and this open standard of IOTA. So that's kind of our main focus right now. Yeah.
You stressed the importance of making money.
Yeah.
Can you say a few words on how you're planning to make money if you open source everything?
Right. So that's always one of those good questions. Like, how do we make money? Like, obviously we don't. We're in blockchain. Now, so the way that we made money is we had this ICO where we raised $500,000, and those $500,000 are now worth $900 million. And so when we started out with IOTA, we also came to the community and said, like, hey, if you want to have a foundation, if you want to have a dedicated team behind us, you have to donate funds. because else we can't continue with this. And the community, because it's kind of awesome community, they donated around 5% of the total supply of all IOTA tokens. And right now the foundation has this 5% of all IOTA tokens, which is about 40 million whatever dollars. And that is one source of funding, but obviously we also work on grants. So we already have a few grants that we got approved of from the German government, for example. And then what we also do is we are setting up this alliance, and this alliance is going to work similarly to the Linux Foundation, where we charge corporates a membership fee. And so through that we kind of have this long-term sustainability of the foundation. Yeah. Yeah. But another, I like to further add on that question, like how do we personally make money out of that? Obviously, like we are kind of altruistic in that sense of developing something, working 24/7, eating a lot of frozen pizza, not for nothing, because we have we have our own vision of where we want to be. But we realized early on, like I said, the foundational layer, the foundational protocol has to be free. It has to be open. Anyone can utilize it without any payment in return. But we, as entrepreneurs, can now start participating in this ecosystem, because having a ground layer that is being adopted, that is standardized, opens up so much more potential for startups to be created. And we as private individuals obviously also have ideas for startups that we want to create. But right now our main focus is really on IOTA. And so one point that I want to drive is, even though we have a lot of money and we have a high market cap, I don't think that we're successful yet. Like I still wake up every day and think like, fuck, like so many problems. Where do I start? But it's still like it's work in progress, and I think that once we reach a point where we're confident that the foundation and the protocol is being utilized and it's kind of independent, doesn't need our carekeeping, then we will start building our own startups. But right now our exclusive focus is really on the foundation. Yeah.
So do you follow up? Can you say something about the importance of hardware development, and is that anything that you guys are having an eye on?
Right. So IOTA came out of a hardware startup, because obviously in order to achieve this vision of this Internet of Things, we need to have those dedicated computational base stations, like for fog computing. And so we are developing this dedicated hardware, and this dedicated hardware is also kind of a very good system for IOTA to be utilized in, because the dedicated hardware makes it possible to execute transactions faster, which now also means that we can achieve much higher transaction throughput and also adoption in that sense. And the hardware, the thing about blockchain is that people oftentimes only tell half of the story. So for example, if you input data into the blockchain, obviously it's immutable. But if the data is fast, you have this garbage in, garbage out principle. You have immutable garbage. And so that doesn't make any sense. So instead, you need to be able to have your protocol to be utilized and integrated into the hardware itself, because of trusted execution environments. So you can be sure that the data that the hardware generates is actually valid. And only then you can start interacting with the distributed ledger and the blockchain. Yeah.
And that is something that you do as well?
Yeah, we have a hardware startup. So the hardware startup was created in 2014. And it's still ongoing, and we'll have some prototypes ready soon. Yeah.
Is it based on PKI infrastructure? Basically, if you run your hardware node or transaction validation point, very new to your architecture.
Yeah, so what we develop is, so we do a lot of fancy stuff apart from IOTA. So the hardware that we created is no longer based on binary, but it's based on trinary. So I don't want to go into details about that, but obviously it's completely new hardware architecture, because our main argument is this Internet of Things is a completely new greenfield. There's no standards yet, there's no real world applications yet, because everyone is just like figuring out like where is IoT going. And so our argument is that in this Internet of Things realm, we can come into this space with a completely new protocol, which is IOTA, and we can come into this space with a completely new hardware, which is GIN, the dedicated hardware for this fog computing. Yeah. So it's a completely new architecture, it's based on trinary.
You obviously see some drawbacks of the blockchain as such, but where do you see, like, for instance, like long-term utility value of blockchain?
The long-term utility value of blockchain versus IOTA? Yeah, so one thing, obviously we're not maximalists, because maximalism is really what's making this blockchain space suck. Because everyone's kind of saying, everyone has a financial incentive to say my protocol is the best, because if you don't say it, you lose money, right? And so we realized that there's not one protocol to solve it all. Our main focus is really on the Internet of Things, but there is so many more applications for blockchain, like especially in the financial sector, where we have banks doing settlement and clearing with each other. So I definitely think that in that specific sector, the financial sector, that blockchain still has potential to be great in that sense. But who knows? Like I said before, this whole blockchain space, nobody knows what they're doing. We're still in this infancy of figuring out where is this really going.
You said you had a whole bunch of problems that you saw and you were still thinking about. What are the
Wait, sorry, what was the question?
I don't know, maybe 5 minutes ago you mentioned that there's a whole bunch of problems that you still see on the horizon, and you said that we haven't been a success yet. So what are some of the biggest problems that keep you up at night?
Right.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the main question was kind of like why I don't think that IOTA is a success yet, and why we are what kind of problems we are facing. So the main reason why I think that IOTA is not a success yet is also because we are kind of pragmatic. We're not people that's hype and say, hey, like we created IOTA, it has $900 million market cap. We really say, hey, once we see IOTA success is when it really is integrated into the car, when it's really being utilized in this whole IoT realm, because without that, we didn't really achieve our vision yet, right? Because the vision is for it to be utilized on IT hardware for machines to trade with each other. And we are not there yet, because right now, this whole blockchain space is in this proof of concept stage. Everyone is trying to figure out which kind of applications actually make sense. And we need to move away from this proof of concept stage towards production-ready applications. And our vision is really to achieve this production-ready vision with IOTA and with this foundation, with an open standard. But that is work in progress.
Are there problems?
What the problems are?
Yeah, that you're facing.
Adoption. Right, the main problem is obviously adoption. Scaling the organization so that we can really make sure that this protocol gets adopted as fast as possible. And I can tell you, like, building an organization is really difficult. Like, even though you have money, this blockchain space has a real hiring problem. Everyone has too much money, and those developers earn like $1 million a year doing whatever. And so it's kind of difficult because we are obviously competing against everyone in that sense. Even though we kind of want to enable this interoperability, at the end of the day, there's this scarcity that you have to compete with each other. And it's still the early stages, so we have to figure out who is going to win this race. Yeah.
Are you talking to startups that are building on top of IOTA already?
Yeah.
Besides corporates?
Yeah, definitely. So startups are like, for example, we work with BigchainDB, we work with Satoshi Pay. So Satoshi Pay, BigchainDB is a private database, a private blockchain that is focused on securing data between corporates, so that you have this consortium chain. So we work with them to have IOTA kind of be this interoperable layer for a second layer of security. So combining private blockchains and permissionless distributed ledgers, like for example, IOTA makes a lot of sense depending on the application that you want to develop, obviously. So we work with BigchainDB on the Volkswagen and the energy use case for car pass, so where we basically secure the data inside the car and give the car a digital identity. And with Satoshi Pay, for example, we work on web payments so that you can now start tipping an author or an artist a micropayment. And then we also work with Refunite, for example, on the refugees identity and also remittances. And we also have another startups which we're going to launch in the coming weeks, where we work on specifically IoT hardware, basically being able to track goods along the supply chain and constantly log the data inside IOTA so that you have this audit trail, like what happened at each point in time along the supply chain. Yeah.
You're speaking to an audience where people probably have very diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about what help do you need right now? How can people get involved?
How people can get involved in IOTA. So another humble brag that I want to throw out is that IOTA right now is the largest Slack community. It has like 13,000 members in Slack. And like, I think we're starting to break Slack. Yeah, so the way to get involved is obviously through things like evangelism, talking to others about IOTA, how awesome we are. And, and the second thing is to build stuff with it. Because if you build stuff, you also start driving this adoption, because now you start benefiting others from this core protocol. Because what we focus on is the infrastructure. We give you the ability to build on top. And also we want to empower people so that they can also achieve this kind of entrepreneurship vision that they have. Any other questions?
What exactly are you doing with Volkswagen?
With Volkswagen,
Can you talk about that?
yeah, I can't talk much about it, but it's basically the use case of the car pass, where we secure the data inside the car and also give the car a digital identity. So that it has a unique identifier so that it can start interacting with the EV charging station and that you as an owner also know the identity of the car. For example, a very interesting problem is the one of odometer fraud. So odometer is the Tachostand for the Germans amongst here. And it's very easy to fake. Like you watch a YouTube tutorial and you can just fake your odometer state, right? And you have a really big incentive to fake it because if you have a lower value, then your car has a higher value because now you said, hey, like I didn't drive this much, right? And with something like IOTA and BigchainDB, we can start constantly logging what is the current value of this odometer thing. And through that, we have this audit trail. Like you now as a purchaser know, hey, like this is the digital identity of the car. And this is the entire audit trail of what happened at each point in time. And as such, you know, nobody can fake it anymore. And so through that, you really enable trust in this economic transaction. Yeah. But we also do some other stuff that I can't talk about. Yeah.
Is there anyone else using Tangle technology?
Ah, you mean like copycats?
Yeah, copycats.
I guess. Yeah, there's some people from China.
Dominik, can you repeat the question?
There's always someone.
So the question was if there's anybody else using Tangle. And so there's some copycats, like I mentioned, in China. And the thing is that now some other projects start realizing, hey, a directed acyclic graph instead of a blockchain makes a lot of sense. So now some researchers as well are starting to ramp up their efforts to figure out like, hey, does a DAG really work in this blockchain realm? And so that is right now the development. But none of them really have anything compared to what we have already. Because we are obviously like first mover advantage. We already have something working. We already have so much corporate and community adoption. So yeah. Everything else is kind of in this research and development stage. Yeah.
What do you think are the 2 or 3 sectors that Tangle could have the biggest impact on?
So I think the biggest impact that, so it obviously depends on the time frame. So if you look at the next 2 to 5 years, I think the biggest impact that IOTA will have is on data security. Like I said, the odometer use case or securing the Internet of Things, those are use cases that provide imminent value. Like you as a corporate you would be stupid to say, hey, like, let's not secure data, right? So those are the use cases where we really see a lot of potential. It can also apply to healthcare data, for example, or sensitive smart meter data and stuff. So there it makes a lot of sense. But obviously the real interest of us is to enable these economic transactions. And there I think, especially in the energy space, those corporates start to realize, hey, we need to start more efficiently distributing the electricity. So there, IOTA, something like IOTA makes a lot of sense. And especially also in the mobility space, because all the OEMs start realizing, hey, like selling cars might not be our future anymore. So instead, we need to build value, new services on top of our car, because now the car becomes a platform, right? And IOTA is one of those enablers for this platform to actually work. So that is why mobility and the whole energy space is kind of our main focus right now. Yeah.
Is there a way to work to get this to operate with just mobile phones or hardware on mobile phones right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's already working today. You can, if you have an Android phone, you can download the app. Yeah.
And so you didn't think that maybe looking for like retail direct-to-consumer applications might have a little smaller sales cycle than like corporates?
Yeah, you mean like.
Apps that would-
You mean like point of sale stuff integration with IOTA? You know, the thing is, when it was in this space in 2013, I looked at BitPay. And BitPay is obviously this payment platform for Bitcoin. And I started realizing, hey, like, in my opinion, this doesn't make any sense at all, because right now all of those cryptocurrencies are just for speculation. You want to hoard your tokens because you think they will increase in value. And that is why nobody really utilized Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies for payments. But I definitely think that in the future that IOTA will be kind of a protocol that will be utilized in the backend to facilitate those transactions. But point of sale is very difficult to get into. And we really focus on machine to machine and this IT space. If you want to work on it, just do it.
Yeah. I mean, kind of thinking out loud, but you know, go to corporates has a long sales cycle, so just thinking maybe there would be a way to create some applications now.
Right.
Can you repeat the question, please?
I was asking, I
Yeah.
asked if anybody had come up with any application ideas that run on their mobile phones right now, run on that hardware, and if they had considered approaching consumer apps as opposed to going to corporates.
So in my opinion, the biggest consumer app where IOTA can add value within the next 2 to 3 years is really remittances. Because there's some very interesting Bitcoin startups that currently utilize Bitcoin, and they're facing some challenges. So something like IOTA makes a lot of sense for them, because no transaction fees, it's very scalable, and it's globally available, right? And yeah.
Last question. Last question. We have other questions, actually? Yeah, one more.
Maybe philosophical one. Do you believe in singularity? Do you think it's going to happen?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was if I believe in singularity, and so the interesting thing, or the interesting philosophical counter question is kind of like, what happens if we combine artificial intelligence with those immutable distributed ledgers? Because now an AI algorithm can also start earning and money, and it can start paying for services. And as such, it becomes truly independent. It no longer relies on anything from us. And so personally, I don't believe in singularity. I definitely think that we will figure out a way for artificial intelligence and our natural intelligence to coexist. But the question is how do we unleash the true potential of this convergence? So that's what we have to figure out over the next 10, 20, 50 years. But I definitely believe that we will progress into a future where we no longer rely on a human economy in that sense, but humans are truly free to pursue whatever they want. Thanks to universal basic income and zero margin society, I definitely think that this is how we are going to progress. Also thanks to the machine economy stuff that we are building.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.